Welcome back to Infidelity to our amazing viewers at Cheating Tales Lab. We'd love to hear, which part of the world are you joining us from? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Life Before. Matthew Lester had always been the kind of man who built things from nothing. At 34, he owned a successful construction consulting firm in Charlotte, North Carolina, specializing in structural engineering for commercial buildings. His reputation was spotless. When Matthew Lester put his name on a project, it meant quality, integrity, and timely delivery. He'd met Christy McCormick 6 years ago at a charity fundraiser for a children's hospital. She was a pharmaceutical sales representative, charismatic and beautiful, with auburn hair and a laugh that seemed to light up any room. Matthew, typically reserved and analytical, had been drawn to her warmth. She was everything he wasn't: spontaneous, social, effortlessly charming. Within a year, they were married. The first 3 years were good. Great, even. Christy traveled frequently for work, sometimes gone for days at medical conferences or sales training seminars, but Matthew trusted her. He'd grown up watching his parents maintain a solid marriage for 40 years. His father, Arnold Hall, a retired Marine, had taught him that trust was the foundation of everything. His mother had passed when he was 25, and his father had never remarried, remaining faithful to her memory. Matthew's best friend, Casey Lowry, had been skeptical of Christy from the start. Casey, a criminal defense attorney with an uncanny ability to read people, had mentioned more than once that something felt off about her stories. But Matthew had dismissed it as Casey being overprotective. They'd served together in the Army before Matthew went to engineering school, and Casey had always been the suspicious one. Around year 4, things shifted. Christy became distant, her business trips more frequent. She'd started spending more time on her phone, angling the screen away when Matthew entered the room. When he'd asked about it, she'd accused him of being paranoid and controlling. Matthew, wanting to be the understanding husband, had backed off. Then came the pregnancy announcement last year. They'd been trying for only 2 months when Christy showed him the positive test. Matthew had been ecstatic. This was what he wanted, what they'd talked about since their engagement. A family, legacy, something permanent. But Christy's behavior had grown stranger. She'd insisted on going to all her prenatal appointments alone, claiming Matthew's work schedule was too unpredictable. She'd become secretive about her phone, changing her passcode and never leaving it unattended. When Matthew had suggested they take a baby moon trip together, she'd gone with her sister instead. Casey had pulled him aside at a barbecue 4 months into the pregnancy. "Brother, I'm telling you as your friend, something's wrong. I've seen this pattern 100 times in my cases. You need to be prepared." "Prepared for what?" Matthew had asked. For the truth to hurt. Matthew had ignored him. He'd been raised to trust, to honor commitments, to see the best in people. His father had drilled those values into him from childhood. Now, standing in the delivery room at Presbyterian Medical Center on a cold February night, Matthew was about to learn that his father had forgotten to teach him one crucial lesson. Some people don't deserve your trust. Chapter 2. The Delivery. The contractions had started at 3 a.m. Matthew had rushed Christy to the hospital, her hand gripping his with surprising strength. Despite everything, the distance, the secrets, the nagging doubts, he'd felt a surge of love and protectiveness. This was his wife. This was his child. This was his family. Dr. Donald Bradshaw had been recommended by Christy specifically. She'd insisted on him, though Matthew had never met the man before that night. Bradshaw was in his 50s, professional and efficient, with graying hair and steady hands. The labor lasted 8 hours. Matthew stayed by Christy's side, holding her hand, whispering encouragement. Whatever their problems, they could work through them. A child would bring them closer together. He believed that. At 11:47 a.m., the baby crowned. Matthew watched in awe as Dr. Bradshaw guided the delivery, the nurses moving with practiced coordination. Then the baby was out, crying lustily. The doctor caught the infant, prepared to hand it to the waiting nurse for cleaning. Then everything stopped. Dr. Bradshaw looked down at the baby in his hands. His professional composure cracked for just a moment. His eyes widened, his jaw tightened. Then he looked directly at Matthew. The color drained from the doctor's face. Their eyes met. Dr. Bradshaw's expression was pure, unfiltered alarm. He mouthed something silently, deliberately. "Run. Just run." Matthew's heart seized. The doctor wrapped the baby quickly in a blanket before anyone else could get a clear look. "Let me see my baby," Christy screamed, reaching out desperately. "Give me my baby." Dr. Bradshaw moved toward Matthew, holding the bundled infant close to his chest. He grabbed Matthew's shoulder with his free hand, his grip tight and urgent. His voice was low, meant only for Matthew. "Sir, you need to leave this hospital. Right now. Don't ask questions. Just go." "What? What are you?" Matthew stammered. The doctor shifted the blanket slightly. Matthew caught a glimpse. His entire world tilted on its axis. The baby's skin was several shades darker than either his or Christy's. The features were unmistakably different, not the generic newborn look, but clearly, undeniably, from different genetic heritage altogether. Matthew was pale-skinned, of Irish descent. Christy was equally pale, with her family tracing back to Scotland. This baby was clearly mixed race with strong Hispanic or Latino features. Christy was screaming now, demanding her baby. The nurses looked confused by Dr. Bradshaw's behavior. One of them stepped forward. "Doctor, the mother needs." "Give me 1 minute," Bradshaw said sharply, his authority cutting through the chaos. He looked at Matthew again. "You seem like a decent man. I'm giving you a head start. Use it. Tales Lab, we're incredibly grateful for your support. Before we begin today's tale, tell us, which city or country are you joining us from? We love connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, Shattered Foundations. Mason Blackwell stared at the miniature baseball glove in his hand, his fingers tracing the worn leather where his son's small hand had once fit. The hospital corridor's fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across his face. Outside the window, Pittsburgh's skyline was obscured by a thunderstorm that matched his turbulent thoughts. Matthew's mind was reeling, but some deep survival instinct kicked in, that part of him forged in the army, trained to act under pressure. He nodded once, turned, and walked out of the delivery room. Behind him, he heard Christy's voice rise to a shriek. "Where is he going?" "Matthew. Matthew, get back here." He didn't stop. He walked down the corridor, past the nurse's station, into the elevator. His hands were shaking as he pressed the button for the ground floor. His vision seemed to narrow, sounds becoming distant and muffled. The elevator doors closed, muting Christy's screams. Matthew Lester descended in silence, his marriage dissolving with each floor that passed. Chapter 3, The First Move. Matthew drove on autopilot to Casey's downtown office. It was Saturday, but he knew his friend would be there. Casey practically lived at his law firm when he was preparing for trial. Matthew parked haphazardly and rode the elevator to the 15th floor. Casey looked up from his desk, surprised. Then he saw Matthew's face. "What happened?" Casey was on his feet immediately. Matthew told him everything. The delivery, the baby, Dr. Bradshaw's warning. Casey listened without interrupting, his lawyer's mind already analyzing, strategizing. "How different are we talking?" Casey asked carefully. "Completely. Obviously. The baby." "Casey, there's no way. No way that's my child." Casey nodded slowly. "Okay. First things first, you need to document everything while it's fresh. Write down exactly what happened, what the doctor said, what you saw. Timestamps, everything." Matthew pulled out his phone with shaking hands and started typing. "Second," Casey continued, "we need to move fast. By now, Christy knows you left. She's going to start damage control. We need to get ahead of this. I want a divorce. Immediately. I know a family law specialist. Marissa Gonzalez. She's a shark, and she handles high-stakes cases. I'll call her now." Casey picked up his phone. "But Matthew, I need you to be smart about this. Don't contact Christy. Don't go back to the house. Whatever you do, don't let emotion drive your decisions." Matthew felt something cold settle in his chest. Not grief, not anger, but something more focused. Clarity. His father's words echoed. "When you're in a fight, son, you fight to win. No half measures." "I want everything," Matthew said quietly. "I want her to lose everything." Casey studied his friend's face and saw something he'd seen before in their army days. Matthew in combat mode. Focused. Determined. Dangerous. "Then we'll need more than just divorce papers," Casey said. "We'll need to find out everything. Who she's been with. How long it's been going on. Every lie, every secret. We weaponize all of it." Matthew's phone buzzed. 17 missed calls from Christy. He turned it off. "There's something else," Matthew said. That doctor, Dr. Bradshaw. He knew something. He warned me specifically. Why would he do that? Maybe he has a conscience, Casey suggested. Or maybe there's more to this story. Within an hour, Marissa Gonzalez arrived at Casey's office. She was in her mid-40s, impeccably dressed, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Casey briefed her quickly. I'll file the divorce petition Monday morning, Marissa said. But Mr. Lester, I need to be clear. If you want to go scorched earth on this, you need to be prepared for her to fight back. She'll claim abandonment. She'll paint you as the villain who left his wife and newborn in the hospital. Let her try, Matthew said. I have a witness, the doctor. If he's willing to testify, that's a big if. He violated patient privacy by warning you. He could lose his license. Matthew considered this. Then we'll need to find another way. Casey, I need you to hire a private investigator. The best you know. I know someone, Casey said. Lorenzo Morrison, former FBI. He's expensive, but he's thorough. Money's not an issue. Matthew's company had been very successful. He had substantial assets, all of which were now at stake. Marissa pulled out her tablet. Let's start with what we know. You've been married 6 years. North Carolina is an equitable distribution state, which means marital assets are divided fairly, not necessarily equally. But proving infidelity can affect alimony and asset division. She traveled constantly for work, Matthew said. Pharmaceutical sales. She's been to probably 100 different cities in the past few years. Do you have access to her travel records? Credit card statements. We have a joint account. I'm the primary on it. And I'm the sole owner of our house. I bought it before we married. Marissa smiled. That's good. That's very good. What about her income? She makes decent money, but I make significantly more. The house, my business, my investments, it's mostly my assets. Perfect. Here's what we do. We file for divorce citing adultery. We immediately freeze joint assets. We demand a paternity test. And we begin documenting everything. Marissa's fingers flew across her tablet. But Matthew, I need to ask, are you absolutely certain? Because once we start this, there's no going back. Matthew thought of Dr. Bradshaw's face. The baby's features. The years of suspicious behavior. Christie's secrecy. I'm certain, he said. Then let's bury her, Marissa replied. Chapter 4, The Investigation. Lorenzo Morrison met with Matthew and Casey on Sunday evening at Casey's office. Morrison was in his late 50s, built like a bulldog, with silver hair and the patient demeanor of someone who'd spent decades watching and waiting. I've already started preliminary work, Morrison said, spreading photographs across the conference table. Your wife's social media, public records, anything accessible. I need you to tell me about her routine, her habits, the people in her life. Matthew walked him through everything. Christie's frequent trips, her changed behavior over the past 2 years, her insistence on privacy with her phone, her company. Who does she work for? Apex Pharmaceutical Solutions. She's a regional sales director for the Southeast. Morrison made notes. I'll need access to any shared devices, computers, tablets, email accounts if you have passwords. I have our home computer. She used it sometimes. Good. I'll need that. What about close friends? Family. Her sister, Julie Bowman. They're close. And she has a female friend from work she mentions sometimes, Vicky Root. Morrison nodded. I'll look into them. Now, the big question. Any idea who the father might be? Matthew shook his head. The baby looked Hispanic or Latino. Christie's company has a diverse staff, but I don't know most of them. I'll get the employee directory for Apex, Morrison said. It'll take a few days, but I have contacts. Over the next 72 hours, Matthew stayed at Casey's guest house, avoiding all contact with Christie. His phone was off. He'd sent a single email to his father, Arnold, explaining briefly that he'd left Christie and would explain more soon. Arnold, ever the stoic Marine, had simply replied, standing by, ready when you are. On Monday, Marissa filed the divorce petition. By Tuesday afternoon, the process server had delivered the papers to Christie at the hospital. She'd been discharged that morning with the baby. The fallout was immediate. Christie's sister Julie called Casey's office 17 times. Mutual friends reached out on social media. Christie herself sent dozens of texts to Matthew's powered-off phone. Her voicemails ranged from tearful pleas, Matthew, please, we need to talk. Come home, to angry accusations, you're a coward. You abandoned your daughter. To desperate bargaining. I'll explain everything if you just come back. Matthew listened to them once, with Casey and Marissa present, for documentation purposes. He felt nothing. On Wednesday, Morrison called with his first report. Found something interesting, Morrison said over speakerphone. Christie's travel records show she's been to Atlanta 14 times in the past 18 months. Always the same hotel, the Meridian downtown. Always checking in on Thursday evening, checking out Sunday morning. But here's the thing. She rarely had conferences in Atlanta. I checked Apex's event calendar. Only 3 of those trips lined up with actual work events. So what was she doing? Matthew asked. That's what I'm finding out. But I did some digging into hotel records. I have contacts. Guess who else was checking into the Meridian on the same weekends? Matthew's jaw tightened. Who? Man named Javier Bishop. He's a sales rep for a competing pharmaceutical company, Titan Health Solutions. Works out of their Atlanta office. And get this, he's originally from Mexico, moved to the U.S. 15 years ago. Casey leaned forward. That's our guy. Looks like it. I'm getting more information on him now. But there's something else. Morrison paused. I accessed Christie's computer like you asked. Found deleted emails in the trash folder that weren't fully purged. She was sloppy about covering her tracks. What did they say? Love letters. Explicit content. Planning meetings. It goes back at least 2 years, maybe more. And Matthew, there are emails about you. She told Bishop she was planning to leave you, but wanted to wait until after the baby was born. She wanted to secure her financial position first. The room went silent. She was planning this, Matthew said quietly. The whole time. It gets worse, Morrison continued. She told Bishop the baby was his. There are emails discussing how they'd handle it. She was going to claim you were the father, file for divorce after a year or 2, get child support and alimony, then move to Atlanta to be with Bishop. Casey swore under his breath. That's fraud. That's paternity fraud. That's our case, Marissa said, her eyes gleaming. This is even better than I hoped. Matthew, with this evidence, we can destroy her in court. No alimony. No asset division. She'll be lucky to leave with the clothes on her back. Matthew stood and walked to the window, looking out over Charlotte's skyline. He felt cold, hollow. The woman he'd married, the woman he'd trusted, had been systematically planning to betray and defraud him for years. I want more than that, he said, his voice steady. I want her to pay. Chapter 5, The Trap. Over the next week, Lorenzo Morrison compiled a dossier that would make a prosecutor weep with joy. Emails, photographs, hotel receipts, text messages recovered from cloud backups. The affair between Christie and Javier Bishop was documented in exhaustive detail. But Matthew wasn't satisfied with just winning the divorce. Here's what I don't understand, he said during a strategy session. Why would she go through with having the baby if she knew there was a risk I'd find out? Morrison pulled out another file. I wondered that too. So I dug deeper into Bishop. Turns out, he's married. Casey's eyebrows shot up. What? Been married for 12 years to a woman named Elsa McLaughlin Bishop. They have 2 kids, ages 9 and 7. And get this, Elsa's family is loaded. Old money, Atlanta real estate dynasty. Bishop married up, and he's been living very comfortably off his wife's trust fund while working his middling sales job. So he couldn't leave his wife, Matthew said, understanding dawning. Christie was trapped. She couldn't admit the baby was Bishop's because he wouldn't leave Elsa. So her plan was to pass the baby off as mine, get a divorce later, and he trailed off. And hope the baby looked ambiguous enough that you wouldn't question it, Marissa finished. Which, given the genetic lottery, was always going to be a gamble. She lost. Matthew smiled, a cold, calculating expression. No, we can use this. Use what? Casey asked. The wife. Elsa. If Bishop's been having an affair for 2 years, fathered a child with my wife, Elsa deserves to know. And if she divorces him, he loses everything. Matthew looked at Morrison. Can you get me information on Elsa Bishop? Already have it, Morrison said, sliding a file across the table. Elsa McLaughlin Bishop, age 41. Comes from the McLaughlin family. They own half the commercial real estate in Buckhead. She's a partner at her family's firm. No indication she knows about the affair. By all accounts, she thinks she has a solid marriage. I want to meet her, Matthew said. Marissa raised a hand. Matthew, be careful. Anything you do now could affect your divorce proceedings. If you go off script, I'm not going to do anything illegal. I'm just going to tell her the truth. that her husband fathered a child with my wife, that she deserves to know what kind of man she's married to. Matthew's voice was calm, measured. That's not illegal, is it? Marissa exchanged a glance with Casey. No, it's not illegal, but it's playing with fire. I've been burned already, Matthew said. Now it's someone else's turn. Morrison made arrangements. Elsa McLaughlin Bishop worked at McLaughlin Properties in downtown Atlanta. Matthew drove down on a Thursday afternoon, dressed in a sharp suit, carrying a manila envelope containing carefully selected documentation. He waited in the building's lobby until he saw her leaving for the day. She was tall, elegant, with dark hair and an air of confidence that came from old money and good breeding. Mrs. Bishop? Matthew approached carefully. She turned, polite but puzzled. Yes. My name is Matthew Lester. I apologize for approaching you like this, but I have information about your husband that you need to see. It's not a pleasant conversation, but I believe you deserve to know the truth. Her expression shifted from confusion to wariness. I don't. Who are you? Your husband has been having an affair with my wife for at least 2 years. She just gave birth to his child. Matthew held out the envelope. This contains proof. I'm not here to cause you pain, Mrs. Bishop. I'm here because I think you deserve the same truth I deserved. Elsa stared at him, then at the envelope. Why would you? Because when someone betrays you, Mrs. Bishop, everyone who helped them should face consequences. And because I think you and I are both victims of very selfish people. Matthew kept his voice gentle but firm. The evidence is all there. What you do with it is your choice. But you should know who you're married to. She took the envelope with shaking hands. I'm sorry, Matthew said. Truly. He handed her a business card. If you have questions, you can reach me here. He walked away, leaving Elsa standing in the lobby, clutching the envelope. The dominoes had been set. Now it was just a matter of watching them fall. Chapter 6. Convergence. For days after Matthew's meeting with Elsa Bishop, Lorenzo Morrison called with an update. She filed, Morrison said. Elsa served Bishop with divorce papers this morning. From what my contacts tell me, she's going nuclear, claiming adultery, demanding full custody of their kids, and her lawyers are already moving to freeze his access to her trust fund. Matthew felt a grim satisfaction. Good. There's more. Bishop apparently panicked and called Christy. We intercepted the call. She was careless, used her regular cell. They had a screaming match. He blamed her for everything, said she was reckless for having the baby, that she'd ruined his life. She told him he'd promised to leave Elsa, that he'd betrayed her. Morrison chuckled darkly. Honor among thieves, as they say. So they're turning on each other, Casey observed. They were in his office again, the war room that had become their headquarters. Like rats on a sinking ship, Marissa agreed. This is even better than we planned. Christie's attorney, some second-rate hack named Pablo Moyer, is already trying to reach out for a settlement discussion. They know they're screwed. Matthew leaned back in his chair. What are they offering? She'll accept a no-fault divorce, waive all alimony, split assets 60-40 in your favor, and she'll leave North Carolina. No, Matthew said immediately. Marissa blinked. Matthew, that's actually a very good. No, he repeated. I want adultery on the record. I want her to admit paternity fraud. I want every lie documented in the court record. And I want her to leave with nothing. If we go to court, it'll be public, Marissa warned. Your name will be in the papers. People will know. Good, Matthew said coldly. Let everyone know what she did. Let her live with that reputation. Let her try to build a life with that scarlet letter attached to her name. Casey studied his friend. You're sure about this? Once it's public, you can't take it back. Matthew thought about the delivery room. Dr. Bradshaw's face. The years of lies. The calculated betrayal. I've never been more sure of anything. Then we go to trial, Marissa said. And we make it count. The trial was set for 6 weeks out. In the interim, the paternity test came back. As expected, Matthew was excluded as the biological father. Javier Bishop, after some legal maneuvering, was compelled to provide a DNA sample. He was confirmed as the father. The media picked up the story. Local businessman discovers wife's affair after birth, read the Charlotte Observer headline. The details were salacious enough to generate significant coverage. Christie tried to control the narrative, giving a teary interview to a local news station about how Matthew had abandoned her. But Morrison had fed select evidence to friendly journalists, and the real story, the affair, the lies, the fraud, quickly overshadowed her spin. Public opinion turned hard against Christie. Social media was merciless. Her employer, Apex Pharmaceutical, quietly asked for her resignation. Bishop's company did the same to him. 3 weeks before trial, Christie's lawyer called for another settlement discussion. This time, the terms were desperate. She'd leave with nothing but her personal belongings. No assets, no alimony, nothing. Matthew almost accepted. Almost. But Marissa advised waiting. There's still the matter of the hospital bills, she said. And more importantly, we want to make sure Bishop is held financially responsible for the child. Right now, because you were married when the baby was born, North Carolina law presumes you're the father. We need to formally disestablish your paternity and establish Bishop's. Fine, Matthew said. Let's do it right. The week before trial, something unexpected happened. Dr. Donald Bradshaw called Matthew's cell phone. Mr. Lester? This is Donald Bradshaw, the doctor from Presbyterian. I heard about the trial. I'd like to testify. Matthew was stunned. Doctor, you don't have to. Your career. I know, Bradshaw interrupted. But I can't stop thinking about that day. About how you looked. I violated protocol warning you, and I've been waiting for the consequences. But they haven't come. And watching what your wife is trying to do now, claiming you abandoned her. I can't stay silent. Why? Matthew asked. Why risk your career for me? Bradshaw was quiet for a moment. 20 years ago, I delivered a baby for my brother's wife. Same situation, baby looked nothing like my brother. I didn't say anything. Professional ethics, patient confidentiality. My brother raised that child for 3 years before finding out the truth. It destroyed him. He killed himself 6 months later. Bradshaw's voice was thick with emotion. I told myself it wasn't my fault. But I knew. And I said nothing. I won't make that mistake again. Matthew felt something crack in his armor of cold vengeance. Doctor, I thank you. See you in court, Mr. Lester. When Matthew told Casey and Marissa, the lawyer actually smiled. That's our nail in the coffin. A medical professional testifying about her reaction, your reaction, what he observed. It's over. But Matthew wasn't celebrating yet. He'd learned not to count on anything until it was final. Chapter 7, The Reckoning. The trial began on a humid Monday in late April. The courtroom was packed. Media, curious onlookers, and a few of Matthew's supporters, including his father, Arnold, who'd driven down from Virginia. Christie sat at the defendant's table, looking haggard. She'd lost weight, and there were dark circles under her eyes. Her attorney, Pablo Moyer, looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Marissa Gonzalez, by contrast, was in her element. She opened with a devastating statement, laying out the timeline of the affair, the deception, the fraud, and the calculated nature of Christie's actions. This is not a case of a marriage gone wrong, Marissa told the judge. This is a case of systematic fraud, of a woman who deliberately deceived her husband, attempted to saddle him with another man's child, and planned to extract money from him through a false claim of paternity. This is a case that demands not just divorce, but accountability. Moyer's response was weak. He tried to paint Christie as a confused woman who'd made mistakes, who deserved compassion. The judge, a stern woman named Geraldine Foley, looked unimpressed. The evidence phase was brutal. Morrison had done his job well. Every email, every hotel receipt, every incriminating text message was entered into evidence. The affair was laid bare in all its ugly detail. Then came the witnesses. Casey testified about Matthew's character, about the kind of husband he'd been. Arnold took the stand and spoke about his son's integrity, his values, his devastation at the betrayal. Even some of Matthew's business associates testified to his reputation. But the most powerful testimony came from Dr. Donald Bradshaw. Bradshaw walked through the delivery in clinical detail. Then he described the moment he saw the baby. I knew immediately, Bradshaw said quietly. Mr. Lester is obviously of Northern European descent. Mrs. Lester is the same. The child's features were distinctly Hispanic. The skin tone, the facial structure, there was no medical possibility that Mr. Lester could be the biological father. And what did you do? Marissa asked. I warned him. I told him to leave. I violated my oath of patient confidentiality because I couldn't, in good conscience, allow another man to be trapped the way my brother was. Bradshaw looked directly at the judge. I knew I might lose my medical license. But some things are more important than protocol. Moyer tried to attack Bradshaw's credibility, suggesting he'd violated ethics. But it backfired. Bradshaw's obvious sincerity and his willingness to risk his career for a stranger made him sympathetic. Christie's testimony was a disaster. Under Marissa's cross-examination, she crumbled. She admitted the affair. She admitted knowing the baby was Bishop's. She admitted she'd planned to deceive Matthew. Didn't you think he deserved the truth? Marissa asked. I was scared, Christie said, tears streaming. I didn't know what to do. So you lied. For 9 months, you lied. Yes. And you planned to continue lying, to take his money, his assets, while raising another man's child? It wasn't like that. That's exactly what it was like, Mrs. Lester. You committed fraud. The final blow came when Marissa entered Bishop's deposition into evidence. Bishop, facing his own divorce and desperate to minimize his financial exposure, had thrown Christie under the bus completely. He testified that Christie had pursued him, that she'd been the one to suggest deceiving Matthew, that she'd planned the entire scheme. Whether it was true or just Bishop trying to save himself didn't matter. It painted Christie as the architect of the deception. Judge Foley took a day to deliberate. When she returned with her ruling, her expression was stone. I've presided over many divorce cases, Judge Foley said. I've seen infidelity, I've seen deception, I've seen cruelty. But rarely have I seen such a calculated, systematic betrayal as what's been presented in this case. She granted the divorce on grounds of adultery. She awarded Matthew 100% of all marital assets. She ordered Christie to pay Matthew's legal fees. She formally disestablished Matthew's paternity and ordered Bishop to be added to the birth certificate as the legal father. Furthermore, Judge Foley continued, I'm ordering Mrs. Lester to pay restitution to Mr. Lester in the amount of $50,000 for emotional distress caused by her fraudulent actions. Christie collapsed in her chair, sobbing. Moyer looked shell-shocked. This court is adjourned. Matthew walked out of the courtroom with his head high. Casey clapped him on the shoulder. Marissa was already fielding calls from media outlets. His father was waiting outside. Arnold Hall didn't say anything. He just pulled his son into a fierce hug. You did good, son, Arnold said gruffly. Your mother would be proud. Matthew felt tears sting his eyes for the first time since the delivery room. Not tears of sadness, but of release. It was over. He'd won. Chapter 8, Aftershocks. The weeks following the trial were strange. Matthew returned to his house. His house now, legally and completely. He packed up everything that had been Christie's and had it delivered to her sister Julie's place, where Christie was staying. The media attention gradually faded. The story had been sensational, but eventually, the public moved on to the next scandal. Matthew threw himself into work. His business had actually benefited from the publicity. His integrity and the way he'd handled the situation had earned respect in the Charlotte business community. New clients approached him, impressed by a man who'd faced betrayal with strength rather than bitterness. But there were still loose ends. Lorenzo Morrison called in late May. Thought you'd want to know, Bishop's divorce is finalized. Elsa took him for everything. Full custody of the kids, kept all the family assets. He's working as a manager at a pharmacy chain now, paying child support to Elsa and to Christie for the baby. And Christie? Matthew asked. She left North Carolina like the judge suggested. Moved to Jacksonville, Florida. Working as a waitress, last I heard. She can't get licensed for pharmaceutical sales anymore. Her reputation in the industry is destroyed. And she's raising Bishop's daughter alone. He wants nothing to do with either of them. Matthew felt a pang, not of sympathy for Christie, but for the innocent child caught in this mess. The baby's name? Isabella. Christie named her Isabella Bishop. Matthew was quiet. That child was blameless in all this. Morrison, I want you to set up a trust fund. For Isabella. Education expenses, medical care. Managed by a neutral third party. Christie doesn't get to touch it, but the child will have what she needs. Morrison paused. That's surprisingly generous. The child didn't ask for any of this, Matthew said. She deserves better than she got dealt. I'll set it up. In June, Matthew received an unexpected letter from Dr. Bradshaw. The medical board had investigated his breach of patient confidentiality. After reviewing the case, considering his decades of exemplary service and the mitigating circumstances, they'd issued a formal reprimand but allowed him to keep his license. Mr. Lester, the letter read, I wanted you to know that testifying was the right decision. Consequences be damned. I can live with a reprimand. I couldn't live with staying silent. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to do the right thing. I only wish I'd had the courage to do it for my brother. Donald Bradshaw. Matthew wrote back, thanking him and inviting him to dinner sometime. Bradshaw accepted. Casey noticed the change in Matthew around this time. His friend seemed lighter, more at peace. You seem good, Casey observed over beers one evening. I am good, Matthew said. I thought revenge would feel different. Hollower, maybe. But I don't feel hollow. I feel clean, like I cut out an infection. That's because you didn't just destroy her, Casey said. You exposed the truth. You held people accountable. That's not revenge, that's justice. Matthew considered this. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just telling myself that to feel better about it. Does it matter? She committed fraud. Bishop committed adultery and abandoned his responsibility. They both faced consequences. You didn't do anything illegal. You didn't even do anything unethical. You just refused to be a victim. Casey raised his beer. That's not something to feel guilty about. They drank to that. In July, Arnold came to visit for a week. Father and son spent the time fishing, working on Matthew's house, and talking, really talking, in a way they hadn't since before Matthew's mother had died. I'm proud of you, Arnold said one evening as they sat on Matthew's back deck. Not because you won, because you handled it right. You kept your head. You didn't let anger make your decisions. You were strategic. That's the mark of a good man. I learned from the best, Matthew replied. Arnold smiled. Your mother would have liked how you handled this too. She always said the best revenge was living well. You've done that. I'm trying to. That's all any of us can do. Chapter 9, Forward. By August, Matthew had fully reclaimed his life. His business was thriving. His friendships had deepened. Casey, Morrison, even Marissa had become genuine friends rather than just professional associates. His relationship with his father had never been stronger. He'd started dating again. Nothing serious, just testing the waters. The divorce had taught him to be more cautious, more discerning. But it hadn't destroyed his ability to trust, just his willingness to trust blindly. One evening, he received a message on LinkedIn from an unexpected source, Elsa McLaughlin Bishop. Mr. Lester, I wanted to reach out to thank you for what you did. Warning me about Javier was the kindest thing a stranger has ever done for me. I'm rebuilding my life now, and I wanted you to know that your courage helped give me the strength to do the same. If you're ever in Atlanta, dinner is on me. Elsa. Matthew smiled and wrote back, accepting the offer. In early September, Matthew's company won a bid on a major project, a commercial complex in downtown Charlotte that would cement his reputation as one of the top structural consultants in the region. The client specifically mentioned that Matthew's reputation for integrity had been a deciding factor. Casey, Lorenzo, and Marissa threw Matthew a celebration party. Matthew's father flew down. Even Dr. Bradshaw attended, having become an unlikely friend. To Matthew, Casey said, raising a glass, who proved that doing things the right way doesn't mean letting people walk all over you, and who showed all of us what real strength looks like. They drank to that. Later, as the party wound down, Matthew stood on his deck alone, looking out over the city lights of Charlotte. He thought about the past 8 months, the betrayal, the pain, the anger, the fight, and finally, the victory. He thought about Christy, somewhere in Jacksonville, dealing with the consequences of her choices. He felt no satisfaction in her downfall, no lingering anger, just a neutral acknowledgement that justice had been served. He thought about Isabella, the innocent baby at the center of this storm. The trust fund was set up. She'd have opportunities despite her parents' failures. He thought about the future, his future, unshackled from lies and betrayal, built on truth and earned respect. His phone buzzed. A text from a woman named Tabitha Ray, someone he'd met at a business function last week. She was asking if he wanted to grab coffee this weekend. Matthew smiled and typed back, "Coffee sounds great." Life moved forward. It always did. Matthew Lester had been broken down, betrayed, and forced to fight for everything. But he'd fought smart. He'd fought fair. And he'd won. Not just in court, but in reclaiming his integrity, his reputation, and his future. The past was behind him now. Ahead lay nothing but possibility. And for the first time since that February morning in the delivery room, Matthew felt genuinely excited about what came next. He walked back inside to rejoin his friends, ready for whatever the future held. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there. To our amazing viewers at Cheating Tales Lab, we'd love to hear, which part of the world are you joining us from? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Arthur Ford had survived 3 tours in military intelligence before he turned 30. He'd interrogated terrorists, decoded enemy communications, and once talked a suicide bomber into surrendering using nothing but patience and psychology. But none of that prepared him for the slow death of a marriage. He sat in his home office in suburban Arlington, Virginia, reviewing security protocols for his latest client, a defense contractor with government clearance issues. Arthur's consulting firm, Ford Security Solutions, had built its reputation on discretion and results. 15 years after leaving the Army, he'd created something he was proud of, a business that protected people without the moral compromises his old work demanded. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Lauren was out again, her 3rd book club meeting this week. Arthur stared at his wedding photo on the desk. 10 years ago, Lauren Maxwell had been a paralegal with dreams of making partner at a prestigious firm. She'd been sharp, ambitious, beautiful. He'd fallen hard. Now, the woman in that photo felt like a stranger. Arthur's phone buzzed. His best friend and former Army buddy, Raymond Owen, had sent a text. "Drinks tomorrow? You sound stressed lately." Arthur smiled slightly. Raymond had a sixth sense for when something was wrong. They'd saved each other's lives in Kandahar. Bonds like that didn't break. He typed back, "Yeah, could use it." The front door opened. Lauren's heels clicked on the hardwood floor. Arthur glanced at his watch. 10:47 p.m. Book clubs didn't run this late. "You're still up," Lauren said, appearing in the doorway. She wore a black dress he didn't recognize, her makeup perfect despite the late hour. "Big contract. You know how it is." Arthur kept his voice neutral. "How was book club?" Riveting discussion about postmodern literature. She didn't meet his eyes. "I'm exhausted. Going to bed." "What book?" Arthur asked casually. Lauren paused. What book did you discuss?" A flicker of panic crossed her face before she recovered. "The one I told you about last week." "You never listen anyway." She disappeared upstairs. Arthur sat in the darkness for a long time. He was trained to spot deception, to read micro-expressions and vocal stress patterns. Lauren was lying. He'd known for weeks. The question wasn't whether she was having an affair. The question was why his instincts were screaming that something far worse was coming. Santiago Graham entered Arthur's office like he owned the building. Designer suit, Rolex, smile that didn't reach his eyes. He was the CEO of Graham Holdings, a real estate development firm that had exploded in growth over the past 5 years. "Mr. Ford, thank you for seeing me on short notice." Santiago's handshake was firm, calculated. "I've heard excellent things about your work. What can I do for you, Mr. Graham?" "Call me Santiago. I'm developing a mixed-use property downtown, residential, commercial, very high-end. I need comprehensive security infrastructure. My board suggested you're the best." They discussed specifications for an hour. Santiago was smooth, professional. Too smooth. Arthur had interviewed enough intelligence assets to recognize when someone was playing a role. "I'll have my team draft a proposal," Arthur said finally. "Should have something by end of week." "Perfect." Santiago stood. "By the way, I think we have a mutual acquaintance. Lauren Maxwell Ford? She handled some legal work for one of my subsidiaries last year." Small world. Arthur's expression didn't change. Very small. After Santiago left, Arthur pulled up Graham Holdings on his computer. Impressive growth, but the financial reporting felt off. Too many shell companies, too many transfers to offshore accounts. Nothing obviously illegal, but the pattern was familiar. He'd seen similar structures in intelligence work, money laundering, probably. His phone rang. "Lauren, hey, I need to work late tonight," she said, voice bright and false. "Client crisis. Might be past midnight." "No problem," Arthur replied. "I'll save you some dinner." After hanging up, Arthur did something he'd never done before. He activated the tracking app on Lauren's phone, software he'd installed years ago for emergencies. The blinking dot appeared on his screen. She wasn't at her office. She was at the Riverside Hotel. Arthur felt something cold settle in his chest. He pulled up the hotel's booking system, easy enough with his security clearance contacts, and found the room reservation. Presidential suite. Registered to Santiago Graham. 3 hours later, Arthur sat in his car across from the hotel, watching Lauren emerge with Santiago. They didn't touch in public, but the intimacy was obvious. Santiago's hand on the small of her back. Lauren's laugh at something he said. Arthur didn't feel angry. He felt analytical. This wasn't just an affair. It was a connection to a client who appeared specifically because he knew about Lauren. Santiago had researched him, targeted him. Why? The next 2 weeks, Arthur played the oblivious husband while conducting his own investigation. He accepted Santiago's contract, using it as cover to dig deeper. Raymond met him at McGinty's pub, their usual spot. Over whiskey, Arthur laid out everything. Jesus, Art. Raymond shook his head. Why not just confront her? Divorce the woman. Because something bigger is happening. Arthur pulled out his tablet, showing financial analysis. Santiago Graham's business is built on fraud. He's leveraging properties he doesn't own, using investor money to fund a lifestyle. The whole thing's a house of cards. When it collapses, and it will, people are going to prison. So he's a crook screwing your wife. Still doesn't. I'm listed as the security consultant on his new development. My name's on the filings. Arthur met Raymond's eyes. If this goes south, I'm the fall guy. And there's a $2 million life insurance policy on me. Lauren's the beneficiary. Raymond went pale. You think they're planning to? I think Santiago needed someone with security credentials to make his project look legitimate. I think he seduced my wife to get to me. And I think when his empire falls, they're planning to make sure I'm not around to testify. We need to go to the police. With what evidence? An affair and financial records that could be explained away? Arthur shook his head. No, I need proof of intent. And I need to flip this on them. That night, Arthur installed hidden cameras in his house. Audio recorders. He cloned Lauren's phone completely. Every text, every email, every call. What he found made his blood run cold. Text from Santiago to Lauren. 3 days ago, Jeffrey confirmed he can handle the scene. Make sure Arthur's home alone Friday night. No witnesses. Lauren's reply. He'll be there. Finalize the payment. Jeffrey. Arthur cross-referenced the name with Santiago's known associates. Jeffrey Harden, a detective with Arlington PD, decorated officer, but rumors of corruption had followed him for years. They were planning to kill him. Make it look like a home invasion. A dirty cop would control the crime scene, ensure the investigation went nowhere. Arthur sat in his office, hands steady despite the adrenaline. He'd faced death before, but never like this. Betrayed by the woman he'd loved, targeted by men who saw him as nothing more than a disposable pawn. Friday was in 2 days. He could run, disappear. He had the skills. But Arthur Ford had spent his life outsmarting enemies. He'd survived ambushes in hostile territory by being smarter, faster, more ruthless when necessary. They wanted him dead? He'd give them a corpse. But first, he'd make sure every one of them paid. Friday arrived with overcast skies and a bitter wind. Arthur spent the day preparing with military precision. He'd arranged for Raymond to be nearby with backup, 2 other former Army intelligence officers, both trusted completely. He'd positioned cameras with live feeds to secure servers. He'd even contacted an old colleague at the FBI, leaving encrypted files to be opened if anything happened to him. But the key to his plan was simpler than all of that. Arthur had hired someone to play him. Guillermo Arroyo was a private security contractor Arthur had worked with before, similar build, same height, skilled actor. At 8 p.m., Guillermo entered Arthur's house through the back door, wearing Arthur's clothes, a realistic mask that could pass cursory inspection from a distance. The Real Arthur Ford was in his car 3 blocks away, watching everything through his phone. Lauren had texted earlier, working late again. Don't wait up. At 9:15 p.m., Arthur's home security system registered movement in the backyard. A figure in dark clothes, face covered, approached the rear entrance. Jeffrey Harden. Arthur recognized him from his research. Guillermo played his role perfectly, moving through the house naturally, sitting in Arthur's office. Then Jeffrey moved. Fast, professional. He'd done this before. But Guillermo was faster. The ex-Delta Force operator disarmed Jeffrey in seconds, zip-tied his hands, removed his mask. Detective Harden, Guillermo said calmly. Arthur Ford sends his regards. That's when Arthur made the call. 911. What's your emergency? Arthur deepened his voice slightly, injected panic. There's a prowler outside my house. I can see someone trying to break in. What's your address, sir? Arthur gave his home address. The dispatcher paused. Sir, that's not possible. We have 2 officers at that address already. Arthur's heart hammered, but he stayed in character. I don't see any officers. What are you talking about? The dispatcher's voice dropped to a whisper, genuine confusion and horror. I know. They're responding to a homicide call we received 15 minutes ago. The victim's name is Arthur Ford. What? Arthur made his voice crack. That's my name. I'm Arthur Ford. I'm alive. Sir, stay on the line. I'm sending units to your location immediately. Do not hang up. Arthur disconnected. Phase 1 complete. Someone else had called 911 claiming to report Arthur's murder. That could only be Santiago or Lauren, setting up the narrative before Jeffrey even struck. But they'd jumped too early, probably assuming Jeffrey had already done the job. Now the police were coming to find a very alive Arthur Ford, a tied-up detective with burglary tools, and enough evidence to start asking serious questions. Arthur drove toward the Riverside Hotel, where his tracking showed Lauren was currently located. Santiago would be with her. Time to introduce himself to his would-be killers. The presidential suite door opened on the second knock. Santiago Graham stood there in a silk robe, drink in hand, confidence radiating from every pore. Until he saw Arthur. The glass slipped from Santiago's fingers, shattering on the marble floor. Hello, Santiago. Arthur stepped inside, closing the door behind him. We need to talk. Lauren emerged from the bedroom, freezing when she saw her husband. The color drained from her face. Arthur, what are you doing alive? Arthur smiled without warmth. Funny story. Your hired killer is currently in police custody. They found him breaking into my house with a gun. Very unfortunate for you both. Santiago recovered quickly, his lawyer instincts kicking in. I have no idea what you're talking about. Lauren and I were just discussing legal matters. In a hotel suite. At 10 p.m., while she told me she was working late at the office. Arthur pulled out his phone, playing an audio recording. Jeffrey confirmed he can handle the scene. Make sure Arthur's home alone Friday night. Lauren's face crumbled. Arthur, please, I can explain. Can you explain conspiracy to commit murder? Arthur's voice was ice. Because that's what this is. Detective Hardin is currently cooperating with internal affairs. He's smart enough to know when to cut a deal. He's already given statements about who hired him. It was a bluff. Jeffrey hadn't talked yet, but Arthur had learned in interrogations that guilty people filled in their own blanks. Santiago's mask slipped. You arrogant bastard. You think you're so clever? I built an empire while you played soldier and security guard. Lauren came to me because she wanted more than your mediocre life could offer. Your empire is fraud, Arthur replied calmly. Graham Holdings is underwater. You've been using new investor money to pay old debts, falsifying property values, laundering funds through shell corporations. I've spent 2 weeks documenting everything. When I'm done testifying, you'll spend the next 20 years in federal prison. You have nothing that would hold up in court. I have your communications with offshore accounts. I have testimony from your contractors about kickbacks. I have evidence you've been bribing city officials. Arthur paused. And I have every text message, email, and phone call between you and my wife planning my murder. That tends to make prosecutors very interested in your other crimes. Lauren was crying now. I never wanted you dead. Santiago said he said we'd be together, that the insurance money would set us up. I didn't know he was going to. Shut up, Lauren. Santiago snapped. But she kept talking, the dam breaking. He said you'd never find out. That Jeffrey would make it look like a robbery. That I'd be the grieving widow, and we'd wait a year before going public with our relationship. Arthur felt nothing but cold satisfaction. He was recording everything. Arthur, please. Lauren reached for him. I made a mistake. I was stupid and selfish, and I'm sorry. But we can fix this. We can. There's nothing to fix. Arthur stepped back. You tried to have me killed for insurance money and a life with a con artist. You destroyed 10 years of marriage. And for what? A man who's going to prison? Nobody's going to prison, Santiago snarled. You think you're the only one with leverage? I have contacts. Judges, prosecutors, people who owe me favors. You're a nobody, Ford. A washed-up soldier playing detective. I'll destroy you in court. Arthur smiled. Probably. You have money, connections, expensive lawyers. Which is why I'm not going to court. What? Santiago's confidence wavered. I'm going to destroy you a different way. Arthur headed for the door. Enjoy your last night of freedom. Both of you. Arthur didn't sleep that night. He worked. By dawn, He'd sent encrypted files to 3 major newspapers, the FBI, the SEC, and the Virginia Attorney General's office. The files contained everything: Santiago's financial crimes, the murder conspiracy, Lauren's complicity, Jeffrey Hardin's corruption. But that was just the foundation. The real genius was in how Arthur had structured the exposure. He'd learned from his intelligence work that timing was everything. Release too much at once, and powerful people could contain it. Release it in waves, each revelation building on the last, and the target had nowhere to hide. Phase 1. At 6 a.m., the Washington Tribune published an exposé on Detective Jeffrey Hardin's arrest for attempted murder. The article mentioned he'd been caught breaking into a security consultant's home, armed, and with clear intent to kill. Phase 2. At 9 a.m., the financial press received leaked documents showing Graham Holdings' questionable accounting practices. Stock prices began to plummet. Phase 3. At noon, the SEC announced an investigation into Graham Holdings for securities fraud. Phase 4. At 2 p.m., court documents were filed showing Lauren Maxwell Ford's involvement in a conspiracy to murder her husband for insurance money. By 3 p.m., Santiago Graham's world was on fire. Arthur watched the news coverage from Raymond's apartment. His friend sat beside him, shaking his head in amazement. "You actually did it. You destroyed them both in less than 12 hours. "Not yet," Arthur said. "Santiago still has his lawyers. He'll try to fight this, make deals, throw everyone else under the bus. Men like him always do. So what's your next move?" Arthur pulled up a file on his laptop. "Santiago's construction project, the one he hired me to secure? I found something interesting while reviewing the plans. The foundation work on the building was substandard. He used cheap materials, paid off the inspectors, cut corners everywhere to maximize profit. So it's unsafe? Catastrophically." Arthur showed Raymond engineering reports he'd commissioned independently. "If that building goes up and people move in, it could collapse within 5 years. Hundreds could die." Raymond whistled low. "You're going to report it." "Already did. To every regulatory agency that will listen. But more than that." Arthur pulled up another file. "I found the names of every investor in Santiago's project. Pension funds, retirement accounts, regular people who trusted him with their money. I've contacted them all, shown them what he's done. They'll sue him into oblivion. They already are. Class action lawsuits filed this morning." Arthur leaned back. Santiago Graham built his empire on lies and other people's money. Now those people are taking it back. His phone rang. "Unknown number." "Arthur Ford," he answered. "You son of a bitch." Santiago's voice was ragged, desperate. "You've destroyed everything. My company, my reputation, my life." "You destroyed your own life when you decided to murder me," Arthur replied calmly. "I'll kill you myself. I swear to God." Empty threats from a finished man. "Your assets are frozen, Santiago. Your investors are suing. The FBI is building a case that will put you away for 20 years minimum. And that's before the murder conspiracy charges. I have money hidden away. Offshore accounts you'll never find. I can disappear, start over, and when I do, I'll come for you." Arthur smiled. "You mean the accounts in the Cayman Islands? The ones in your mother's maiden name?" "Already froze them. Worked with some old intelligence contacts. Turns out financial crimes with international implications get special attention." Silence on the other end. "You have nothing left," Arthur continued. "No money, no influence, no future except prison. That's what happens when you underestimate your enemy." "Why?" Santiago's voice broke. "Why go this far? You could have just divorced Lauren, moved on. Why ruin me?" "Because you tried to take my life," Arthur said quietly. "Not just kill me, erase me like I was nothing. Like I was a piece of trash to be disposed of for your convenience. You wanted me dead so you could steal my wife and my insurance money and build your fraudulent empire on my grave." He paused. "So I took everything from you instead. Your freedom, your wealth, your reputation, your future. Now you get to live with the consequences of your choices. Just like you wanted me to die with yours." Arthur hung up. Raymond stared at him. "That was cold, man." "That was justice," Arthur corrected. "The legal system will handle the official punishment. But I wanted him to know that he didn't just lose. He lost to someone he thought was beneath him. That's a wound that won't heal." 1 week later, Santiago Graham's arrest made national news. Arthur watched from his attorney's office as federal marshals led Santiago out in handcuffs. The man who'd been so confident, so untouchable, now looked small and broken. His expensive suit couldn't hide the defeat in his eyes. Lauren was arrested the same day. Conspiracy to commit murder carried serious time, even with cooperation. Her legal career was over. Her life as she'd known it was finished. Arthur felt nothing watching her perp walk. No satisfaction, no pain, just emptiness. "The prosecutor wants to meet with you," Marcia Lamb, his attorney, said. She was sharp and efficient, came highly recommended. "They're building an airtight case, but your testimony will seal it." "I'll testify to everything," Arthur replied. "Every detail." Detective Jeffrey Harden had already pleaded guilty to attempted murder and corruption charges. Facing 25 years, he'd given up everything: names, dates, payments, the entire conspiracy. His testimony corroborated everything Arthur had documented. But the real earthquake came from Santiago's business collapse. Graham Holdings declared bankruptcy within 72 hours. The investigation uncovered fraud totaling over $200 million. Investors who trusted Santiago lost everything. The media called it one of the biggest Ponzi schemes in Virginia history. Federal agents raided every property, every shell corporation. They found evidence of bribes, kickbacks, money laundering. The web of corruption was staggering. And at the center of it all was Santiago Graham, the architect of his own destruction. Arthur's phone rang. "Raymond, turn on Channel 7. You'll want to see this." Arthur switched on the TV in the conference room. A news anchor was speaking. "In a shocking development, 3 city councilors have been arrested in connection with the Graham Holdings scandal. Sources say they accepted bribes totaling over $500,000 to approve building permits and overlook safety violations." More arrests. More dominoes falling. Marcia whistled. "You really kicked over an anthill. This is going to be investigated for years." "Good," Arthur said. "Every person who helped Santiago should answer for it." That evening, Arthur returned to his house for the first time since the attempted murder. It felt strange, walking through rooms that should have been his crime scene. The life he'd built here with Lauren was ash now. He stood in the bedroom, looking at their wedding photo on the nightstand. 10 years. All lies. No, he decided. Parts of it had been real, once. But people changed. Or maybe they just revealed who they'd always been. Arthur packed the photo away. Time to move forward. A knock at the door. He wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, he saw a woman in her 60s, well-dressed, nervous. He didn't recognize her. "Can I help you?" Arthur asked through the door. "Mr. Ford? My name is Susan Grimes. I need to talk to you. Please. It's about Santiago Graham." Arthur's instincts flared. Caution warred with curiosity. "How did you find my address?" "I'm an investigator. I've been following Santiago for years." She held up credentials. "I work for a private firm. Please. Just 5 minutes." Arthur opened the door, keeping his distance. "What do you want?" Susan looked haunted. "My daughter, Brittany. She worked for Santiago 3 years ago. Paralegal, bright future ahead of her. She discovered his fraud, threatened to report it." Arthur's blood chilled. "What happened to her?" "Car accident. Police ruled it mechanical failure, brake line rupture. But I never believed it." Tears welled in Susan's eyes. "I've spent 3 years trying to prove Santiago had her killed. I hired investigators, reviewed evidence, but I could never get enough for charges. And now he's exposed. Now the FBI is digging through everything. I gave them my files this morning. They're reopening Brittany's case as a potential homicide." Susan met his eyes. "I wanted to thank you. Because of what you did, my daughter might finally get justice." Arthur felt the weight of that. His revenge hadn't just been about himself. It had exposed a monster who'd hurt countless others. "I'm sorry about Brittany," he said quietly. "If there's anything I can do to help the investigation." "You've already done more than you know." Susan touched his arm gently. "You stopped him. You made sure he couldn't hurt anyone else. That's worth everything." After she left, Arthur sat alone in the gathering darkness. He'd thought his revenge was about punishment, about making them pay. But it was bigger than that. It was about protection, about making sure Santiago Graham never had the power to destroy another life. That realization changed something in him, softened the edges of his anger. 3 months later, the trial began. Arthur sat in the witness stand, facing the courtroom. Santiago's expensive legal team had tried every trick to suppress evidence, dismiss charges, delay proceedings. But the evidence was overwhelming. The prosecutor, a fierce woman named Naomi Bernard, led Arthur through his testimony with precision. Mr. Ford, please describe the events of September 13th. Arthur recounted everything: the investigation, the discovery of the murder plot, the confrontation. He spoke calmly, factually, letting the truth speak for itself. Santiago's lawyer, Alan Baird, tried to discredit him during cross-examination. Isn't it true, Mr. Ford, that you broke into Mr. Graham's hotel room without permission? I knocked. He opened the door. I was invited in. Isn't it true you have a history of violence from your military service? I have a history of defending innocent people from those who would harm them. Yes. Isn't it possible you fabricated this entire conspiracy because you were jealous of Mr. Graham's relationship with your wife? Arthur met Santiago's eyes across the courtroom. If I'd wanted revenge for the affair, I would have just divorced her. I only acted when I discovered they were planning to murder me. The jury listened intently. They'd seen the evidence: text messages, financial records, Jeffrey Hardin's testimony. There was no reasonable doubt. Lauren testified next, her lawyer having negotiated a plea deal. She looked broken, aged 10 years and 3 months. Did you conspire with Santiago Graham to murder your husband? The prosecutor asked. Yes. Lauren's voice was barely audible. I'm so sorry. I was selfish and stupid, and I destroyed everything. Did you understand that Arthur Ford would be killed? Santiago said. He said it would be quick, that Arthur wouldn't suffer. Like that made it better. She sobbed. I told myself it wasn't real, that it wouldn't actually happen. But I knew. God help me, I knew. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Santiago Graham was sentenced to 35 years in federal prison for fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, bribery, and money laundering. With good behavior, he might see freedom again in his 70s. Lauren received 10 years for conspiracy to commit murder, with the possibility of parole after 7. Her cooperation had reduced her sentence, but not the weight of her crime. Detective Jeffrey Hardin got 15 years. His badge and gun were gone. His reputation was destroyed. Arthur watched the sentencing from the gallery. He felt Raymond's hand on his shoulder. It's over, his friend said. Yeah, Arthur replied. It's over. 6 months after the trial, Arthur Ford stood in his new office. Ford Security Solutions had moved to a larger space downtown. The publicity from the case, man uncovers murder plot, exposes massive fraud, had brought in more clients than he could handle. He'd hired a staff of 12, including 3 other former military intelligence officers. But more than business success, something else had changed. Arthur had testified before Congress about security vulnerabilities in financial oversight, helping to draft legislation to prevent frauds like Santiago's. He'd worked with the FBI to train agents on recognizing complex money laundering schemes. Susan Grimes had become a friend. The FBI had indeed reopened Brittany's case, finding evidence that Santiago had ordered her death. More charges, more time added to his sentence. Susan finally had answers, if not peace. Arthur had also started a foundation in Brittany's name, helping families of corporate crime victims navigate the legal system. Using his settlement from Lauren's assets and his own resources, he'd created something positive from the darkness. One evening, Raymond joined him for drinks at McGinty's pub. Their tradition resumed. How you holding up? Raymond asked. Better. Some days are harder than others. Arthur sipped his whiskey. I thought I'd feel more vindicated, triumphant, but mostly I just feel tired. You took down a killer, saved lives, and exposed corruption. You're allowed to be tired. I keep thinking about what Susan said. If I hadn't investigated, if I'd just ignored the affair, Santiago would still be out there. How many more people would he have hurt? But he's not, Raymond pointed out. Because you were smart enough to see through him and brave enough to act. That's not nothing, Art. A woman approached their table, Marcia Lamb, his attorney. Mind if I join you? Wanted to update you on the civil suits. Please. Arthur gestured to a chair. Marcia grinned. All the investors in Graham Holdings have settled. You're getting a percentage as a whistleblower under federal law. Should be a substantial amount. How substantial? $3 million. After taxes. Arthur blinked. I wasn't expecting that. Fraud cases with successful prosecution often reward those who expose them. You earned this. Marcia raised her glass. To justice, and to getting paid for it. They drank to that. Later, Arthur walked alone through the city streets. The night air was cool, stars barely visible through the light pollution. He thought about the man he'd been a year ago, happily married, or so he'd thought, successful but complacent, unaware of the predators circling. That man was gone. This Arthur Ford was harder, wiser, more cautious, but also more purposeful. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but instinct made him pick up. Arthur Ford. Mr. Ford, this is Clark Thomas with the FBI. I'm heading up a new task force on corporate corruption and organized crime. I've reviewed your work on the Graham case. I'd like to discuss a consulting position with us. Arthur smiled. I'm listening. 2 months later, Arthur stood before a class of FBI recruits, teaching them how to identify complex fraud schemes and murder conspiracies. The key, he told them, is understanding that criminals think they're smarter than you. They think they've planned for everything, covered every angle. Your job is to be patient, methodical, and smarter. Gather evidence. Build an airtight case. And when you move decisively. He thought of Santiago Graham, rotting in a federal prison. Of Lauren, who'd destroyed her life for a fantasy. Of Detective Hardin, who'd sold his badge for cash. They'd all thought they were clever. They'd all thought Arthur Ford was just a target, an obstacle to be removed. They'd learned differently. After class, Arthur checked his email. A message from Susan Grimes. The appeals court upheld Santiago's conviction. Brittany's case goes to trial next month. Thank you for never giving up. Thank you for making sure he pays for everything he's done. Arthur typed back. He played a game he thought he'd already won. But he forgot that the best chess players think 10 moves ahead. Justice isn't always fast, but it's inevitable if you're patient enough. He closed his laptop and looked out the window at the Virginia sunset. Somewhere out there were other predators, other Santiago Grahams who thought they were untouchable. But Arthur Ford was watching now, and he'd learned that the best revenge wasn't just destroying your enemies. It was making sure they could never hurt anyone again. The dead man had lived, and in living, he'd become something more than he'd been before. He'd become a guardian. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.